Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and for the next hour, we really have a special program for you. We're going to be going over how the injustice system can really railroad somebody with little to no evidence at all, and then when you try to make a defense, their narrative is the only one that is enforced by a judge. Not to mention the smears that go along with this. And I think it's very, very, timely, especially with what's going on with Julian Assange. Because if you look at Ross Ulbricht, he was a free speech advocate. He was somebody who wanted less government control. And we're going to go over everything from the Silk Road to Dread Pirate Roberts with his mother and this atrocity of a trial. Lynn Ulbricht. And thank you for joining us. So for people not familiar with your son, let's just give them a bio pre all of this Silk Road stuff.
Oh, pre. Okay.
Yeah, just start there.
Yes, there was life before this, wasn't there? Yeah, Ross, well, he's been called a computer programmer. He wasn't. He got a scholarship to college as a physics student, and then he got another scholarship to a graduate school in material science. So he's really a scientist, and he also became very passionate about libertarian thought and freedom and free markets while at Penn State in graduate school, and worked on the Ron Paul's 2008 campaign, and just became very passionate about that and wanted to give people the experience of a real free market. And he did this. The idea was this led to the website called Silk Road, that actually he didn't do the programming. He had a friend who was actually testified at trial that put it up technically. That friend, by the way, testified that Ross told him he had gotten out of the Silk Road situation going forward. He wasn't the one running it the whole time at all. But in any case, that's a whole other thing. But the Silk Road went along with Ross's philosophy of the non-aggression principle, which is based on solely voluntary interaction that doesn't hurt a third party. If two people want to exchange something and it hurts a third party, for example, with child pornography that hurts a child, it was not allowed. Stolen property, not allowed. Various things that hurt a third party. But drugs were allowed because it was considered a choice between those two people, mostly small amounts of marijuana between individuals. And that's corroborated by a Carnegie Mellon study. But there were other drugs and allowed. And Ross was never accused or prosecuted for selling drugs himself, but he was held responsible for everything that was on the site, even though he never touched the stuff, It's like holding Jeff Bezos responsible, or Craig Newmark on Craigslist responsible for what's bought and sold on the internet on their site. So what happened was it got out of hand, got huge, and Ross basically was made a trophy for the government and an example, and given double life plus 40 years without the possibility of parole. He was a first-time peaceful offender, no violence in any of his convictions, never prosecuted for causing injury or death or harm to anyone. And yet they gave him this the judge did, outrageous sentence of double life plus 40 years, way more harsh than many, many murderers get. I have a personal friend I was just talking to whose daughter was literally murdered in cold blood. The guy got out after 18 years. There's such a disparity of sentencing. The other thing is the other Silk Road defendants and people involved. The highest sentence that an actual drug seller got was 10 years. And it goes down from there, including corrupt agents who were involved that the jury couldn't know about because of the judge, and including the guy that was running Silk Road 2, which was identical according to government and bigger according to government. And he was spent 13 or 16 days in jail, and that's it.
So let's
So,
back up. Let's just back up to what the Silk Road was, because a lot of people, especially now that it's been defunct for so long, there's a generation that might not even be familiar with it. I mean, it has been that long. So
yeah.
this starts over a decade ago, right around the time of Bitcoin. The transactions are semi-anonymous, and the administrator, through what the government has provided, uses the tagline "Dread Pirate Roberts." Now, there's a great documentary out there on this called Deep Web. I believe it's Alex Winter. He's done great
It
stuff
is.
all the way around. I just watched his Showbiz Kids, but he really encapsulates once again how once the government gets a hold of you, it's their narrative that matters, whether or not there's any truth to it. So just to kind of go back to, the genesis of this. This is really, those that are on message boards now might get a feel if you're active on Reddit or maybe 4chan, 8chan in these small groups. But this was a dedicated user base, not just of people looking for drugs, but of people looking to decentralize through tools like Tor. So that's really the genesis of this, and then a marketplace on top of this, not only because he felt like the drug war was unfair, but also because big pharma and pharmaceuticals were also extremely unfair. And this created that marketplace. And you have to wonder if that wasn't the main motivation, because what you were hearing about the dark web at the time is, again, child pornography, which you said was banned, murder for hire, which was extremely ludicrous, yet they eventually try to pin that on your son without you even getting to look at the log files. And, as we know now, because of Snowden's revelations, we know that the government has made not only redactions in documents, but made completely fake documents on classified material. So you have to wonder, where these administrators or logs even come from when they get to your son. So how long, I'm not even sure you were aware at the time. I know when you find out he's arrested, you come back from Costa Rica. But how long are they alleging that your son was the sole administrator? Because even Dread Pirates Roberts' contacts with media was saying he wasn't the originator. He had kind of inherited this thing.
That the person in the interview didn't.
Yes.
Yeah, they got it from the person who started it. You covered a lot of things. Let me just quickly address some stuff. It was Silk Road. It was about Bitcoin and the potential for monetary freedom through Bitcoin at the time. Very few people had heard of it, and Silk Road put it on the map, essentially. It was the first proof of use of Bitcoin. That is why I think they went after Ross particularly so hard, because it was, you don't mess with the money. And it came out a couple of years ago through Snowden papers again that the NSA was actually urgently pursuing Bitcoin users, and Silk Road, obviously, if they're pursuing Bitcoin users, right before the site was taken down. So the full force of the federal government was illegally very threatened and going after Bitcoin. And so that is my personal theory of why he got so much more than anyone else involved, than any drug dealers, even actual kingpins. And they're saying he's a kingpin. It's as if he was controlling the whole thing, and each person and threatening. And, even El Chapo got half the sentence Ross got. And it's absurd, right? But they're calling him a kingpin. That's like a website host is a kingpin, like Bezos is a kingpin. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think that Bitcoin's a lot of it, but just that free access of information, I think, also they wanted that chilling effect. I think it maybe even is a precursor to WikiLeaks, right? Because you see, right after they were able to get your son, there was more and more propaganda against Assange. This is when he eventually has to go into hiding in Ecuador, and we've seen what's happened since. So Bitcoin, I think, is definitely part of it. But again, just something that was outside of their access of this track trace database society, which they had already erected. They didn't like that all these people were decentralized and more anonymous than anywhere else on the internet.
No, you're right. I agree. And I think Bitcoin fits right into that. But yeah, I think you're correct. That's a good point. And you brought up the evidence. It's like in past courtroom trials, digital evidence was not permitted because it is so easily faked and manipulated and deleted and, created. But this judge allowed it. And it was, this whole murder for hire smear that happened was never charged at court, at trial, I mean. It was, it has since been dismissed in Maryland, where they also had it in an indictment, but it was based on the evidence of a corrupt agent who just has been in prison for his corruption in the Silk Road case, and they've dropped it. So nowhere in the legal system is this murder for hire allegation there anymore. But the government, and this is what they do, I've heard it over and over again, they'll say stuff to the press and smear people, but not actually charge it or have to prove it. Mm-hmm. And then it undermines support.
Well, everybody thinks it.
The evidence, there's a whole thing on our site called Silk Road, the Real and Untold Story, and you can watch it as a video, you can read it, or you can do a podcast, and they go into the whole laptop investigation and what a farce that was, and how one agent had the laptop unsupervised for 3 hours. You could put anything on there.
In moments.
All kinds of stuff. So it's like, really? This is evidence, and all of the murder for hire chats that were supposedly evidence were all anonymous. Mm-hmm. There's no witness that says this, and of course no murders occurred. So that, that kind of thing. But this is what happens in our justice system now. Mm-hmm. The defendant goes in with a huge disadvantage if they dare to go to trial, which most of them don't anymore because they're so threatened by prosecutors, mm-hmm. and their families are threatened. And they're told they're going to lose, and they probably will.
Well, just like you said, they loaded the deck, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. Totally load the deck, yeah.
So they get the public to already go against the guy. There's no free speech advocacy. We're not talking about just being a drug kingpin. Now we're talking about murder for hire. And like you said, they put these things out there with any evidence, just like Julian Assange was a rapist. You see these.
I was going to bring that up.
Yes.
Because when I first saw that, I'm like, so did he go to trial? Was this proven? Was the woman's word put up? No. But it's this thing out there now for Julian Assange. He's a rapist. Well, he's a bad guy. So this is what they do. And it's like, don't we have trials? At least in the United States. Aren't we supposed to have trials? A trial by jury, 12 people, not by one judge who decides that, it must be true because the prosecutor says it? Mm-hmm. I mean, good point.
No, absolutely, Lynn. I can, first of all, let me just say, I can only imagine your frustration as a mother. This is your child that has not only been railroaded, but he was never violent. He'd actually done something.
Never in his life.
What's that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Never in his life. There's 100 letters on our site about Ross himself, but people know him. He's a gentle, caring, compassionate person, always has been, always.
Mm-hmm. And because he was able to build, again, this empire outside of what was accepted, or outside of this predator class, these accepted billionaires in technology, like the Bezos, as you brought up, like the Bill Gates, was in favor of getting outside of that mechanism, kind of like this anarcho-capitalist, somebody, like you said, that worked with Ron Paul. He was definitely a threat to these people. And so as we go to trial, and all of a sudden, all this talk of murder for hire is gone, some of these people couldn't even be identified. Talk about the lawyers' inability not only to know what was coming because they kept throwing new things at them as this was going on, but then their inability to call the witnesses they wanted or even cross-examine in the proper way.
Well, that's true. And it's super frustrating. The judge would shoot down our lawyer over and over again. He tried to cross-examine the agent who had the laptop for 3 hours unsupervised. Shot that down, said, bring your own witness, which actually is a violation because the defendant is not responsible for proving innocence. It's the prosecutors who have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But we tried. The lawyer tried to bring someone, and she wouldn't allow him to speak, wouldn't allow Andreas Antonopoulos to speak about the Bitcoin, which, it was completely misrepresented and confusing. And of course, the jury had no clue what they were talking about because the jury had no idea what Bitcoin was, how it worked. But the judge said, no, you can't have them. They understand Bitcoin just fine. I'm like, no, they don't. Very few people understand Bitcoin just fine. Mm-hmm. And there was a witness who was not permitted to be presented to the jury that really showed that Ross was not the only Dread Pirate Roberts, that there was another person, wouldn't allow that. And this is all in this document to go into detail, but it's so much. I'm just trying to touch on things. And I think that might have, and of course the corrupt agents. There were 2 corrupt agents who had free reign of the site and could change content in chats, and which were used as evidence, all kinds of things. They could act as DPR. They could literally act as the administrator and other aliases. They were not allowed to be known to the jury. The jury had no idea that these corrupt agents even existed. So that right there is a huge violation, because every bit of evidence is supposed to be brought forward to the jury. And I feel like and then after trial, the defense kept digging and found that there was while Ross was in prison, DPR logged into Silk Road Forum from the DPR account. Who was that? And that somebody else erased a big bunch of very important relevant evidence before trial so that was not shown. It's like a lot of things were manipulated, and the narrative was carefully controlled, and the judge allowed it. And of course, prosecutors, that's what they do. And it was a travesty. And they wanted that trophy. They wanted Ross as their trophy. They had to have one guy. And Alex Winter makes this point quite well in Deep Web. It's like, that's not how the web works. It's not like there's one guy wearing a hoodie in a cafe running a multi-million, not billion. It never got to billions. According to the government, it was 183 million. But that's a lot. That included legal items too. But anyway, running this thing by himself on my laptop. It's just not feasible. And there are people that on Deep Web, like one of the admins, he was anonymous on the movie. You probably saw it. He's like, oh yeah, everybody knew there were lots of DPRs. If we didn't get what we wanted from one, we said, let me talk to the other one. And yet Ross is held responsible for everything on that site, everything there. And then they pile on the charges and give him this draconian sentence of, it's not, it's all nonviolent. It's all nonviolent.
And not only that, like you said,
it was a death sentence, a death in prison sentence. That's what she gave him.
It's incredible, again, because people that were actually convicted of, drug dealing and money laundering, et cetera, got less time. And
a fraction. So much less. It's a joke. Ross got 2 centuries essentially. The biggest drug seller got 10 years. The next down was 5. The next down was 3. I don't want them in prison either. But come on, this disparity of sentencing shows that it's political, that it's unfair, that it needs to be changed. It just can't. This can't be in our country. Well, it's really serious.
To 2 of your points, you look at the criminal charges. So let's start with the money laundering charge. You made the point about Bitcoin that most of these people didn't even realize what it was. Well, there had been court rulings prior that Bitcoin was not money, and yet now they're trying to make it money or acknowledge it money. And that's really just one of the tragedies in what they charged your son with, because they don't even really have to provide how they legally or illegally got into the server and whether or not they violated what? Search and seizure laws, people. I know it's 2020 and our constitutional rights are by the wayside, but even 10 plus years ago, what I'm trying to tell you is they were gone then. And they obviously violated his search and seizure rights, his privacy rights, if in fact they were his at all, wherever this server was. And that's something the defense was privy to none of it. They were not allowed discovery on so much of the evidence they needed to try to defend Ross correctly, which would speak to the fact of many administrators, IP addresses, etc., and the possibilities of where this could have been Ross, where this definitely was not Ross. Like you said, it wasn't even discussed. So speak to that, of your access to the evidence that was actually supposedly provided by these agents.
Oh, it was a struggle from the beginning, because the judge did say that Ross could access evidence, discovery evidence, to help prepare work with his lawyers to prepare his defense. But then there was stonewalling from the government itself, in the prison itself, where a guard would just say, no, you can't. There were days when Ross couldn't eat because he finally got the computer and he just wouldn't eat all day long because he finally had it. But then the computer malfunctioned. Took weeks and weeks. And meanwhile, we've got a deadline coming up. We've got a trial, right? Weeks and weeks and weeks. Had to go back to court to say, look, this isn't right. Go back. And, and the thing they do, and anybody will tell you this, and in fact, Roger Stone talked about this in an interview. I was on a podcast with him, and a lot of the things are very similar. It's interesting. They pile on so much garbage. They pile on I forget what it was, 4 terabytes, or gig, I don't know, whatever, a lot, more than any human being could read in, who knows how long. Mm-hmm. Certainly not enough time. And within that, you're looking for these needles in a haystack. And that's what was found after trial about the login by the admin who erased evidence, and about the DPR login. Mm-hmm. That was there. So they can say, oh, no, we gave it to you. But they bury it in such a way that no one's going to find that stuff. And actually, it was in a hidden folder. If the person looking through it hadn't been so thorough, they wouldn't have seen it even after trial. So, yes, this is just out of the playbook. This happens all the time. And again, this is our justice system weaponized against citizens. This is not right. And they have, from what I can tell, what I've heard and what I've observed, prosecutors want to get that win. That helps their career. Many people benefited in their careers out of Ross's case. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the lead prosecutor was Preet Bharara, who was fired by Trump earlier. But the second in command is Sarah Turner. He's working for Facebook now. So it's like they go into the judge is in the private sector, I'm sure, earning quite a bit of money as well. So that it benefits their career. And I believe that's their motivation. A lot of it is they got to win, mm-hmm. whatever it takes. And they don't suffer consequences if they're discovered either. I mean, people are trying to change that, but generally they're promoted. So I really believe our justice system has been taken over by prosecutors, and they run the place. And then complicit judges will go along with them. Not all, some judges are good, but some are not. And so we really don't have a justice system. We don't have trial by jury. We don't have a fair trial system anymore. And that's why 98% of people plead guilty even to things they haven't done, because they're told, and it's correctly told, that they will pay what's called a trial tax. If you go to trial, you will be penalized. You will get a worse penalty if you lose, and you're going to lose. And most people do. Mm-hmm. Like 1% of people win or something.
Well, yeah, the 1 or 2% that can afford to win, that are in that privileged class.
How are you going to go to trial? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we were able to, by the help of donations from people who cared about our case. Mm-hmm. And then we went all the way to the Supreme Court, and with the generosity of this really excellent lawyer at that stage, who really did it for a huge discount, because he felt like it was an important case and he wanted it to be seen. And we had no luck with any of it.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how long your son is now spent in prison, what you're trying to do. Obviously, freeross.org is out there, both legally and through the media that largely ignores this case. But obviously, there's alt media like myself to try to get the word out of how we can petition our government. Donald Trump, you were talking about Snowden. You've obviously pivoted away from Assange, so I definitely don't think you're going to talk about Ulbricht. But he's one of these people that should absolutely be pardoned or his sentence commuted, and they should come clean to what they did to this guy. I mean, again, when you talk about this is really a free speech issue, and it shows, again, even pre this, we didn't have the privacy we thought we did. We didn't have the speech we thought we did. And, the federales, if you will, really showed their hand. So how long has he been there? What can we do now? And how can we challenge the system?
Well, I just want to say a quick word about speech, because in the sentencing, the judge said to him, "We know you started this site for philosophical reasons," which right there, by the way, shows that she knows that he didn't start it to be a drug kingpin, that he had a philosophy, which was libertarian and voluntary interaction. He started the site for philosophical reasons. And then she said, "But I'm just not sure it's a philosophy you've left behind," which is basically saying, this is such a dangerous, threatening idea and philosophy that I'm going to have to put you in a cage and have you die there. You die in a cage for that philosophy. Now, we live in America. First Amendment to the Bill of Rights is free speech. We are not supposed to be put in a cage for our philosophy, period. And she admits it. She absolutely admits that's what she was doing. As regards what we can do now, Yes, we have freeross.org. We have, and please go there. There's so much information because it's a very complicated case, and it covers, gosh, it affects, as I said, First Amendment, but also Fourth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. I mean, it attacks our Bill of Rights in so many ways, and that's all on there. And the precedent that's set, and that's why it's so important that it's commuted. Besides the fact that I want my son home, is that this sets a precedent in the courts. This means that the next person that they want to put away for that kind of draconian sentence, well, there's precedent for it now. Mm-hmm. And that's what the courts rely on, is precedent. Mm-hmm. This was passed. This was fine. It passed the appeal. It's all good. It wasn't stopped by the Supreme Court. So there we are. We have precedent. And this kind of sentencing is extremely threatening to us as free individuals. Mm-hmm. So there's that. So go to freeross.org. There's ways to help. If anyone has political connections at any level, please get in touch with me. You never know where one thing will lead to the next. We do have this petition. I didn't check this morning, but it's over 350,000 signers who signed saying, please, President Trump, please commute this sentence. It's not fair. It's not right. There's no guarantees, but it certainly helps me when I go to talk to someone like a legislator and they see that number and they go, oh, wow, that's a lot of people. It does impact things. So please sign the petition. Please go to the website. There's ways to donate because, of course, this is an ongoing huge expense. I think we have we have 4 lawyers right now for different things, having to fend off different things, even now, this much later. And I just, I think for the precedent that's set, and for just plain justice, and the fact that there's so much excessive sentencing in our country. Ross isn't the only one. There are people, I think there's 150 marijuana offenders serving life. And actually Ross was friends with one of them in Colorado. And it's in Colorado where it's legal on the state level, but he's serving life for marijuana in a federal prison there. It's insane. And but there's I think, the Sentencing Project said over 17,000 non-violent people are serving life sentences. What? They're not violent. How about letting them out and have them make restitution to their quote unquote victims? Of course, no victims were named in Ross's trial, but whatever. Don't, and the taxpayers are paying millions and billions of dollars to cage these people for life. Mm-hmm. It's wrong. We are, the biggest incarcerator on the planet of our citizens. And it's really a human rights crisis and a national disgrace that needs to end. It needs to be corrected to how it was before the drug war. It wasn't always like this. This is un-American. It wasn't like this. Mm-hmm. This is metastasized 800% the prison population since the drug war. And it's become a huge mass industry and money-making force, and it's really an evil thing. And I feel like when you're making money off of human beings, you're involved in human trafficking, and this is an evil thing that needs to be stopped. And it's really not. It doesn't fit with the values of our country.
Well, you would think that, but the irony is that, you talked about the drug war, and in the 80s, it was exposed as to being part of our government. You look at Iran-Contra, those people really never served any time. That network was never really broken up. And, we could talk about the drugs being flown into South America. But again, like you said, El Chapo gets less time than your child. And you began with something really key. I know it's unbelievable. But you talked about how they knew this was a philosophical start to something different. If you look at the counterintelligence 2020 to 2022 document, they talk about what? They talk about Iran, they talk about North Korea, they talk about Al-Qaeda, they talk about ISIS, all in the same sentence of ideologically motivated entities, hacktivists, leaktivists, which hacktivists and leaktivists, what's that even mean? And public disclosure organizations. And that's really what the Silk Road, other than a marketplace, was. It was ideologically ideologically motivated entities. It were people that wanted, certain information you couldn't get elsewhere. And we're not talking again about CP or the abuse of children. No, they wanted a free and open place to maybe go over government documents that WikiLeaks was leaking, and then have a forum where they could have a discussion where their IP wouldn't be traced.
Exactly.
Where they wouldn't be.
It was about privacy, And as far as CP, Ross actually has an article he wrote that's up on medium.com and on our website, where he, in prison, has been working on technology to solve the tension on WhatsApp is one of the places it's really coming forward between privacy and people that are involved in very harmful things, harmful to children, harmful to people, hiding behind the privacy. And he's got this whole, I can't even understand it, it's quite technical, but in any case, thing that he's been working on where keep the privacy, but somehow not allow this cover for these people that are preying on children and others. And he can't develop it. He's in prison. And so he's published what he can. Experts have looked at it, said it's promising, it's sound. But here's this person who wants to contribute at that level to our world. What's the point of it's like they're keeping him from doing that and helping others. And that's just one example of who Ross is, just FYI. So yes, it was ideological in the way of basically the same ideal as our founding fathers, freedom, privacy, individuals interacting. I'm not saying it was all good. I'm not going to defend the site. I'm not going to defend drugs, all that. I'm just going to say that the intentions were, and the judge is right, it was based on a philosophy. And when the government doesn't like your philosophy, ideas are very dangerous. Ideas are more dangerous than drugs. Ideas are more dangerous than almost anything. And they recognize this as a very dangerous idea. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. And that, goes along with a lot of what you've said.
Well, again, when you talk about privacy and then you talk about modern day censorship, most people 6 to 12 months ago couldn't have even thought the fact that, you mean YouTube and Facebook are going to start censoring doctors when they have an opposing opinion? Twitter's just going to start taking tweets away from political figures, including the president, whether they're right or wrong. There's fact checks now on articles that aren't written by Esquire and the New York Times. I had an Esquire writer on here, and he kind of did this hit piece about me, but I agreed to do the article because he let me tape the interviews, and he said he would come on my show. And, I fact check him on the air because he told me the fact checkers were doing it. I proved that he printed a total misnomer, a total lie. I go, but your article will never get a fact check. You're not censored. You work on behalf of Hearst Publications, part of that media military industrial complex that's telling us what and how to feel about things and issues like this one. And you would think if the Silk Road wasn't taken offline, it wasn't just a marketplace, but again, more of a place for forums, and then maybe even developed into a platform of sharing video content, especially now that there are all these all platforms. There are Dropbox, Google Drive, etc. That never ever came to fruition, and you saw other sites try to clone what your son had done, and it never came into fruition. Do you think that was because of the chilling effect of his sentencing, where a lot of people backed off of those marketplaces? Or do you think that now the tools are in the government's hands where they're able to infiltrate and control these dark websites better?
Interesting question. What happened after the sentence was, the judge is like, this is going to be a deterrent. And the next day, in an article, I think in Wired, the whole thing exploded and a whole bunch of sites opened. It was the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think his sentence was a deterrent. That's what they wanted it to be. And setting an example, I don't think so. I don't know why things like Dropbox and Google Docs have been able to develop. It might just be pure technology developing. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about it, I don't know. I'm not the right person to ask, but it's like, think about how no one had heard of Bitcoin, for one. It was a different world. Marijuana was not legal anywhere, as far as I know. Now it is on many states. And that's moving towards federal, I believe, legalization, or at least decriminalization. Hey, Chuck Schumer's using it as a campaign, topic. oh, I want to decriminalize marijuana. It's like, okay, nice. In any case, point being, times have changed. But when you give a life sentence, and so is Ross, by the way. I mean, he was 26. He's 36 now. And I don't know how old you are, but you can probably relate to how different, you were when you were 26. And it's like, that's the thing about a life sentence. It's a long time. And a lot happens. And, I think if Ross had been at trial in California where he was actually arrested and actually, was caught, arrested, and it would have been a different outcome than the Southern District of New York. And now I think it would be a different outcome. Mm-hmm. But no, whatever, Bitcoin or very few, some people, but not the general population like they have now. Mm-hmm. And as far as the media, I don't believe anything the media says, honestly, unless I really look into it, because Ross has been lied about so much. I have been misquoted so many times. And these are by reputable, mainstream people. That doesn't surprise me at all, what you just said. Mm-hmm. And I've turned down for interviews that really wanted me. I've turned them down because I've been burned. You say, oh, we're going to help you. It's going to get it out there. And then they turn it so that, it does much more harm than good by distorting what really happened. And they're not really interested. To them, it's like, well, let's talk about all the evil things that were on there, as opposed to, well, how about let's talk about raw milk? That was on there too, but you never talk about that.
Well, raw milk is evil. I mean, they've demonized that forever.
Raw milk.
That's how they feel. When you talk about the mainstream media, oh my goodness, it doesn't have the pasteurization process. We're now in 2020, Lynn, where germs are everywhere and bacteria is everywhere. I mean, my goodness, what are you thinking? We're trying to get ahead of this stuff with this overarching government. But you talk about the Southern District of New York, and you talk about the corruption there. Now, on a base level, I think there are a lot of good people, like, for instance, the people that wanted to bring Epstein in. And then, on the real level, you have the first suicide after the second attempt, of course, in a prison that hadn't had another suicide in 13 plus years. And no one ever talks about these things. We just have to accept it. We have to accept the cameras are off. It shows the level of disdain and corruption and the fact that your son couldn't get a fair trial. Because you put this in front of an actual jury of people's peers, it's a different situation. These people are constantly stacking the deck. In the Assange case, they have a 100% conviction rate where they want to bring him into D.C., 100% outside in Virginia. It's unbelievable. He's going to get a fair trial. But I feel like, they set the precedent with Ross. They throw the book at him for this. And now they're extraditing non-U.S. citizens. And, which is insanity. They're not even, people are like, well, he's a traitor to this country. He's Australian. He's not a traitor to this country. I mean, that's how little the public knows. You talk about irony, right? You talked about Chuck Schumer, for instance. He's going on the legalization of marijuana platform. Well, Anthony Weiner is back in the state. He is a convicted sex offender, child abuser. He gets, I think he got less than 18 months, served like 15 of it. He's publicly able to go into a business of marijuana in front of everybody. Like you said, you said 1,000 people in this country or something like that?
According to the Sentencing Project, yeah.
Yeah, that are serving...
They're nonviolent people serving life sentences, yeah.
Serving life sentences.
And if you include people who have virtual life, which is basically it's so long that they're going to die in there, it's over 200,000 people.
And that guy...
Nonviolent, please remember, nonviolent. These are not people who, if you're walking down the street at night, you have to be afraid of. And you can say, oh, they did wrong things. Okay. Death in prison? They deserve to die in prison for that?
Well, you talk about the nonviolence. Lynn, the nonviolence. The thing is that in New York, even before all of this, even before releasing prisoners from COVID, what happened? In January, we had the catch and release program go out. Now, some of these people that were caught and released were literally bank robbers. They were violent offenders. They committed involuntary or voluntary manslaughter and then were let go. People were actually released from prisons retroactively. And yet Cuomo or de Blasio or any New York State official, congressman or senator won't whisper your son's name. Well,
Oh,
I
no,
talk about
no. He's done for that. There, he's checked the box, done, dead to them. They don't. He's done. That's it. No, they don't care about him. They're glad, they, they don't care.
so.
Yeah, so it's they don't care about people,
Mhm.
like the prisons and the court system. As far as I can tell, they don't care about human beings. I see no evidence of it. I really do. I don't.
So is
It's
the answer to this to try to sue these people? Like, is that what I mean? Is that the answer? Because that seems to be the
I
only
didn't
way.
hear the first part. I'm so sorry. What'd you say?
I said, is the answer to this to sue these people? Because it seems like the only thing they know. I mean, if you look at, for instance, at the Epstein case, right? It's really the
Yeah.
lawsuits that at least get the public information out there. And I don't want to say fighting the actual court system is futile, but just the revelations of the corruption is got to be somewhat of a win for you when you're able to expose these things. And unfortunately, like you said, they don't care about people. It's not a fair system. You've been all the way to the Supreme Court, and they've basically silenced you. The media is not here to help. I mean, what? I understand we have the websites. I understand, you're out here on this show talking about it. And I hate to talk this way, but our lawsuit's really the only viable way to get truth in this point. And that's a sad state of affairs for this
I don't
country.
know. I haven't really looked into suing the government. It sounds like a nightmare. I don't know if that's really the right way to go, but it's certainly something to ask around about. See if I can get some information. I don't know, but
well, maybe not even just the
what we're
government,
hoping
the
for is clemency from
individuals.
the president. We're hoping for clemency from President Trump.
Yeah.
Because this is something that needs to be corrected. Alice Johnson, who, he pardoned recently and he commuted, and I'm glad he did. She was held responsible for more drug sales than Ross. She was held responsible, and she was called a kingpin by the prosecution. So, I mean, there's people who, you can go into, oh, they did this and they did that, but they're, when you give a life sentence, there's no chance for mercy or redemption. People, it's like, that's a value in our country. People, it's one of our values is mercy and redemption. And this system does not allow for that. And they took away parole in the 80s with the drug war, and conjugal visits, by the way, but which we could talk about how that makes no sense. But parole is no longer in the federal system at all. So it used to be if you had a life sentence, you could go up for parole, you could show you're good, you had change. No, they took it away. So life is life. Life is death. A life sentence is death sentence. Walking death sentence. That's what it is. And they just give it out quite casually. Ross was that judge's fifth life sentence that year, and it was only May. 5 in the first half of 2015.
You
She's
mentioned
like a hanging judge. She's a hanging judge. I think of her as like Bloody Mary, off with their heads, kind of person. And okay, give them life, put them away. Oh yeah, it was a philosophy. Well, we don't like that philosophy. We don't like that at all. So you're dangerous. Gone. This shouldn't happen in the United States. I did a tour through Eastern Europe speaking at one point, and I had people from Eastern Europe going, we know about tyrants. We know about Stalin and Hitler. This is just like what they did. It's exactly the same. If we've lost really the pillars of our justice system, which is a fair trial by your peer and jury of your peers. It's not there. We don't have it. We don't have it. It's been co-opted and taken, hijacked. Our values and our protections they've been hijacked and continue to be, and especially when it comes to drugs. It's like the drug exception. Well, if it's about drugs, no more Bill of Rights for you. We make the drug exception and we just do whatever we want.
You talked about being on Roger Stone's program. I'm curious, especially with what Roger's just gone through. And by the way, I'm not a huge Roger Stone fan. Godfather of lobbying, all those things. But what they did to him and what they got him for was ridiculous. It was on its face lies. Anybody who's studied that case knows it's lies. He's not an agent of Russia. He wasn't colluding with them. Again, it's a farce. what is, and he's got an ear for the president. The president did pardon him. They got rid of it, and he should have. I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I actually wasn't on his show. I was on the crypto show with him.
Okay.
And he started talking about all the stuff they did, and I'm like, that's just like what happened to us. And it's out of the same playbook. It's that same playbook, and I think it's what happens to a lot of people. And so it's good that he was talking. It was right before he was gagged. Mm-hmm. Roger Stone was gagged, and that was his last interview before he was gagged. And it's not the point whether you like Roger Stone or you like Ross or you think. It's about the principles involved and about the protections that should be in place in our country if we're going to be a free country. It has nothing to do with the people involved. It's about the principles. And I don't see us running things by those principles. Very rarely it happens, but yeah.
Well, at least
they create evidence, just like with Ross. They, for example, I told you how you're looking for the needles. They did the same thing to him. Mm-hmm. It was just one thing after another. It was, oh wow, check. Okay, that's what they did to Ross. Interesting. This is what they do. It's scary when you think about it. It's frightening because I feel like if they want you, they will get you. There's going to be something.
I don't think you're wrong. I think especially when you get to those levels where you are threatening their power structure, not only manufacture evidence, but again, manufacture that false narrative that will follow you through your life, whether or not you're convicted of anything, Right. So unfortunately, I mean, I guess I see your point as to, hoping for some kind of executive help in this matter. Again, it's 2020. Things are wild. Trump's a wild card. I think that anything could happen. It's good that Stone's at least aware of it. Where can people find you in the coming days and months talking about this and hopefully garnering more awareness so that becomes more of a possibility?
I really have nothing scheduled publicly right now. I mean, I do speak. I just spoke to Americans for Tax Reform, a DC group. And different people come up. I, just go to freeross.org, but it doesn't really have my schedule. Mm-hmm. We do have Twitter. Ross has Twitter as well. He writes it on paper, and then a close family friend posts it. And it's a good place to go, by the way, to get to know who Ross is and get a sense of him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he doesn't talk about his case, but he just talks from the heart, and he's growing plants in his cell from apple seeds. Okay, he talks about that because that's like nurturing these apple seeds and spreading them around, and things like that. I mean, he's just a sweet guy, and he's funny, and he's like a good person, and anyway. So you could check out real Ross U. That's him. At Ross _free_ Ross is me. We also have a Free Ross community page that often things I'm doing are up there on Facebook, and then Instagram, Free Ross Ulbricht. So we're on social media, and it's just working to get the word out. And we do. Like I say, we have over 350,000 people signed the clemency petition, so we are getting it out there, and just keep at it. Take it one day at a time, and just keep at it. We're not a big organization, so we just keep at it.
Well, Lynn, I want to not only thank you for your time, but your dedication to this. I can't imagine what this has been like personally for you. It goes so much further, and I think you know this, than just beyond, a mother and her son. It's something that affects everybody. Whether or not
bigger, yeah, it has. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and people need to understand that implication. And again, if they'll do this against somebody who had a website because he threatened their control, again, over information, over tracking people well over a decade ago, look what they're doing now. And understand that those mechanisms are only getting stronger and stronger and more authoritative. So if we're not willing to stand up now for people that kind of pioneered this in the past and say, hey, this is an injustice, we need to take care of our legal system. This is a travesty. We can't have this going on. And we need to push back, not only with Ross, not only with Assange, not only with Snowden, but every other whistleblower out there. Think about it. Assange publishes Manning's paper of, again, real child abuse from Abu Ghraib, where they're literally torturing and sexually abusing children in front of their parents. And that's never brought up. Those people were never brought to justice. They had murder on film, and what do? They shoot the messenger. They go after these people. So, Lynn, again, anytime you want to come on, please email me, get at me, and anytime you have something going on and you want that voice out there. My audience does need to go to freeross.org, support this woman, and sign this petition. Is there anything you want to leave them with?
No, but I'm just really grateful for the opportunity. It's been a great discussion. I do, Ross and I both feel like when I get him out, when we get him out, we want to fight for criminal justice reform, and not just, it is bigger than just him, it really is. Mm-hmm. And please, yes, do sign the petition. And you and I have some really close mutual friends. I hope I get to meet you in person sometime.
Sounds good, Lynn. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason.
You got it. There she is, Lynn Ulbricht, everybody. And I think it was a really great discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that if you didn't know about this case, you now do. I'd encourage people to go check out Alex Winter's film, Deep Web. It's a great movie. It really gets you to understand the nuances of this case. Alex Winter, I need to get him on the show, because what an awesome documentary filmmaker. Everything I've seen from Alex Winter, whether I agreed with certain points or not, is just top-notch, good stuff. And just so you know, that's the Bill and Ted guy. You bet it. Guys, if you enjoy programming like this, again, we're fully demonetized here, 5+ months, okay? Need your support. Very low on the GoFundMe this month. We're at $921. I'd love to at least hit 2,000. Geez, midweek. We didn't do it by the end of last week, but that's okay. $5, $10, $15 means the world to me. Consider donating. Again, all my documentary films, they are free in the playlist section. Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture. Thumbs them up. Share the videos. Ring the bell. Star right up here in the corner. See that? And then you just come back every day and there's new stuff. But find an individual video and then share it in a DM. Get somebody to watch it. Get somebody to join the Burmese Brigade. If you're not signed up for Rockfin, you need to be. Now's the time to sign up for Rockfin. Why? Tomorrow at noon, we do the exclusive live free stream. And by the time I'm in Iowa, guys, it's going to be 11 to 1 Eastern every single day, or at least 5 days a week. I think Monday through Friday we're going to do it that way. And then we're going to cut the videos up and then put them on YouTube. But if you want everything live and exclusive, you're going to have to be signed up for the free Rockfin account, okay? Not asking for the premium, although the premium supports me and you get a bunch of great content outside of just Jason Burmese, but create the free one because, again, if they kick me off this platform, that's where I'm going to be. And once again, if you're not following her, follow Lynn at @free_Ross. And then you can follow her son at RealRossU. And freeross.org is where you can find the petition to sign and so much more. Guys, thanks for joining me on this very important broadcast. I love you, and I'll see you on the flip.